Thank you. I'm delighted to be here in front of a lot of libertarians, and I feel especially glad to be in a bunch of libertarians here for this. The topic is immigration, the hot topic. As you know, it's been on the news a lot. And when I think about it, a lot of times people are talking about solutions of various kinds. But I think we ought to look at the causes of this. And for solutions, well, for example, Christians look for guidance to a principle of what would Jesus do? Because Christians have a big experience with famine and fleeing and persecution and compassion. They have a way to look at these issues. For libertarians, we have the non-aggression principle, which I think is a very applicable thing. Non-aggression principle, for those who aren't familiar with it, is, that I don't have the right to initiate force against my neighbor. To take his life is murder. To take his liberty is slavery. To take his property is theft. Thanks for that tag. And if I don't have the right to do these things, I don't have the right to ask somebody else to do it for me. Even if a whole large number of people vote to do something, if it's wrong for large numbers to do as well. Years ago, in 1986, I ran across an article in the Wall Street Journal that cited a letter from Patricia Brown, who was the co-owner with her husband of a plantation of sugar in Belize. And the letter was written to Nancy Reagan, pleading with her, please ask your husband not to close down the sugar trade. Because he had just cut down half of the sugar that was allowed to be imported into the United States from various favored countries, the Philippines, Dominican Republic, and throughout Central and South America. Well, what this did, she said, is it's throwing them all out of work. Well, and 1 million people in the Philippines. I was in Baguio in the Philippines, where the countryside, the hillside was filled with people who were displaced from the sugar plantations in Ilocos Norte. And Reagan said, well, that's not a problem, we'll send you aid. We'll buy up a lot of food from farmers in the United States and send it on Jones Act ships down to Central America to compensate you for the loss of income. Well, that wasn't help. That would hurt more farmers. It destroyed the rice farmers in Haiti, the cotton farmers in Brazil, the corn farmers in Mexico. They were ruined by this aid. She said, well, that makes the America look bad compared to the Soviet Union. At the time, the Soviet Union was 60 cents a pound to Cuba for sugar, and the United States wouldn't buy it at 5 cents a pound. So what does that make the people feel as their friend? If they start to grow marijuana instead, what is the United States going to do? It's going to send military weapons down there to prevent them from going to communism or prevent them from growing drugs. Well, that military aid was leading to warfare through a lot of those countries. At the very same time, mind you, Ronald Reagan sent weapons to China, sold weapons to the People's Republic of China, the biggest communist country in the world, at the same time he was saying he was fighting communism in El Salvador. Well, these things were horrible, and she said, ultimately, the people from my plantation aren't going to starve to death, aren't going to die in warfare, they'll move north. It was driving migration. So who were the losers? These trade barriers are essentially theft from American consumers who have to pay twice as much, where's the button here for changing? Oh, okay. Thank you. This is the slide that I missed in showing you all the letter from the lady from Belize and all of the arguments that she was making about why not to cut down the sugar trade. And then my points here of these trade barriers are theft from Americans who could be buying food at maybe 1/2 or 1/3 or 1/4 the price that they have to pay from domestic farmers. In other words, the U.S. domestic sugar price is twice or 2 times or 3 times what they could pay if they were allowed to buy food from these other countries. Well, now as an American, That's theft for me. I have the right to buy food from wherever I want. But quotas were established as a protectionist measure to prevent us from doing that. It costs Americans $4 billion more for food per sugar. That's just for sugar, not to mention all the other things that are protected in a similar way. That's a cost of $826,000 per sugar job that is protected, and 3 jobs are lost in the food industry for every one job saved in the sugar industry. Who are the winners? 42% of this subsidy of $4 billion a year goes to the top 1% of the sugar farmers. They're big farmers indeed, like the Van Hool brothers, the Flowson Corporation in Florida. For example, they've got 180,000 acres. It's not a small family farm. And they have $500 million in family wealth. And every year, they get $64 million in higher food prices from American consumers for their benefit because we're not allowed to buy the sugar from poorer countries abroad. And also, winners are the government agencies that have bigger budget and staff for all of these agencies, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, State Department, AID, DEA, DOD, and ICE. Now, the kingpins of this whole crime operation are the presidents of the country. Ever since Reagan, the presidents have done the same thing. Not that one party or the other has been in favor of free trade, even though Ronald Reagan was a very big verbal champion of free trade. Milton Friedman and William Niskanen both said he was one of the most protectionist ever, but then came along the others. Oh my gosh. Okay, the trade barriers and subsidies are theft from farmers abroad. The losers are those who have had their trade banned. That means the cost to poor countries amounts to about 3 times what they could get from all overseas development assistance combined. And yet, that overseas development assistance is often ruining their farmers as well. To get an idea about how they would feel about this, imagine how American farmers would feel if the Canadian government bought up a lot of wheat from the Canadian farmers and then unloaded it for free on the American market. American farmers would be outraged. They'd say, wait a minute, what's going on here? How come we can't sell our products with that kind of subsidy? And yet, okay, so the winners are those in the United States, Europe, and Japan that receive about $700 billion every year to subsidize their crops and their livestock. For example, enough money to fly 41 million farmers, or 41 million cattle around the world first class. 1.5 times is how much it is. And the winners also are to $300 billion to a corrupt and repressive regimes and criminal drug lords by the existence of prohibition that tremendously enriches the criminal world at the expense of the poor in those countries. Oh, good, okay. The market alternative is, of course, better than central planning, government central planning. Voluntarism and the non-aggression principle would bring an end to trade barriers that rob U.S. consumers and Latin American producers. It would end the subsidies and protectionist corporate welfare. See, we're talking about welfare. People all the time say, well, the immigrants come for welfare. The biggest welfare by far is the corporate protectionist welfare that goes to undeserving interests, corporate interests in the United States, Europe, and Japan, at the cost to U.S. consumers and taxpayers. Also, end the drug prohibition that fuels global crime and corruption and invites military interventionism from around the world. I'm reminded, of course, of the two. Okay, let me just mention two of my favorite economists. Henry George, who said that protectionism in all of its forms does to your own nation in peacetime what the enemy would do to you in wartime. And Friedrich Bastiat, who said, when goods can't cross borders, soon nations will. Okay, now to this slide. This slide shows what we're expecting in the near future. President Reagan has been reelected, and he promises even much more trade barriers and much more farm subsidies than in the past. When he was the president, the farm subsidies doubled because he was trying. What's that? You mean Trump or Reagan? Trump. Yeah, did I say Trump? Oh, I said Reagan. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. To me, this is a sad sign with these kinds of trade barriers of promising as much as 60% on China and 100% on Mexico and 10% across the board. To me, it's going to be raising tariff levels to those of the Smoot-Hawley tariff, the things that brought on the Great Depression. Okay, one more. Next slide. There we go. The steel protections that he put up. The center circle shows the number of steel workers who were benefited by his steel trade barriers. But the outer circle, the lighter circle, is the many more, the 2 and 3 times as many workers who were adversely affected, who lost jobs because of the increased price of steel. In other words, they lost competitiveness and had to move abroad or close down. So these kinds of trade barriers are damaging to the U.S. economy. Next slide, please. There we go. Now, Trump has referred to immigrants as, well, drug dealers, criminals, and rapists. Frankly, I think this does a tremendous disservice to millions of immigrants who have come to this country and provide valuable, invisible services. Just on Monday, I spoke to a gardener who was working at the beach at a resort there, and I said, where are you from? He says, I'm from the Philippines, sir. I said, do you have kids? He says, yes, I have 3. Are they in school? No, they're out of school. My daughter is a nurse, my son is an accountant, and my other son is in the military. And I thanked him for his work because he's invisible. So many people that do work around us all the time, taking care of us in so many ways, are done such a disservice by these kinds of labels for immigrants. Now, yes, it's probably, they contribute about $1.5 trillion to the economy and paid $500 million, $500 billion in taxes. So they're not deadbeats. And I've indicated here with 3 dots among 100,000 dots how many the Cato Institute says probably commit on average murders or homicides in the United States. Now that's bad, but they also indicate that the crime rate of Native Americans is much more than those of immigrants, whether they're documented or undocumented. But that's beside the point. Yes, there are bad people around the world, but let's not treat everybody, not treat 99.9% of the population as bad people or murderers or criminals and rapists just because there are some who do that. There are some who do that. I would say that, here I've got in the little blue section there, how many people die just trying to get into the country through the borders or across the seas and so on, die because their life is so desperately bad where they are from. Okay, next slide. Forward, not backward. Well, yeah, that one. Okay. Everybody knows of Timothy McVeigh, who's at least my age and so on. Timothy McVeigh was America's worst terrorist. He blew up the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, killed lots of people. But we hold people individually accountable for their behavior. We don't hold them en masse. Because he came from New York, we don't hold all the people in New York responsible for the deaths of that person. We hold people individually responsible for their actions. And by the way, this other guy who came from New York, one more slide, Donald Trump, came and he's faced a lot of accusations about, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, yeah. Okay, he's faced a lot of charges. It's a little bit like the pot calling the kettle black, that's saying that they're criminals and rapists and so on. He's faced these charges, but I'm not going to take on whether or not they're valid claims or not. I don't know about all that. What I'm saying is that people will often excuse behavior of the people that they want to excuse, and they won't excuse the behavior of people who they don't want to excuse. They'll elect a person here as president, and they'll say that all those charges were false or bogus or politically charged. Well, I would say that's true. And the next slide, please. That's true of immigrants, too. It wasn't a criminal activity to come across the border seeking for work. The Declaration of Independence was signed by people who all protested in the Declaration of Independence that King George III wasn't allowing people into the country. And they were one of the first reasons that they wanted to separate from England, among taxes and so on, was also the obstruction of people coming to the country. We had an open borders for 100 years practically, until the Fugitive Slave Act was, of course, a racist law to keep sending runaway slaves back to their rightful owner. That was a racist act. Then finally, after the Civil War, we had the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was also based on racism, which Ayn Rand identified as the most primitive form of collectivism, to hold people responsible for, by their race or religion. And then the National Origins Act of 1984. We used to accept 98% of the people who applied for immigration got in, 2% for various other reasons. But now, after the National Origins Act, only 3%. And this is basically using labor protectionism as the motive for keeping people out. Of course, race still played a role, religion still played a role, but labor protectionism, a welfare of its own form, was to protect American workers from that competition from abroad. Now, to the marketplace, people are an opportunity. We should welcome them. But to the government, people are always a problem, something to be discouraged. I'm particularly impressed by the Cato Institute's work on how difficult it is now for somebody to get into the country. They apply, and for someone who's, for a family of US citizens coming from Mexico, it takes 76 years to process a visa for an unmarried adult child. And they process 60 million people for tourist visas every year, for business visas every year, for student visas every year. And yet they only can process only 1% of that for people who want to work. And I'd say that's intended to be a form of labor protectionism. Now, what about coming across the border illegally? Well, I'd say that it's not such a terrible crime. I'm guessing that probably everybody in this room, except for my wife maybe, has probably said that they won't ever drive over the speed limit. But most people do, to save a few minutes of their life. And they even do it at greater risk to themselves or to other people, and yet people do it all the time. Even when they get stopped by the police, they do it again. And they all excuse it if someone's life is at stake. When I took my wife to the hospital to give birth to our daughter, no one would have objected if I went over the speed limit to get her to the hospital. When people's lives are at stake, they're probably not going to wait around 76 years to save their family and their lives, or maybe to increase their income by 100-fold or 10-fold or 5-fold with these opportunities at stake that matter so much in life. So, next slide. Everybody allows sportsmen, athletes, to come from all over the planet. We want the best for the Olympic team, for our sports teams in soccer or in basketball. In fact, our most valuable player award has gone in the last 5 years for the National Basketball Association to foreigners, expats, people from abroad. This kind of competition should be allowed in every kind of occupation, not just sports and things with big headlines. Next slide. So ultimately, I like to say that market alternatives are better than government planning. That's voluntarism and the non-aggression principle. End work restrictions. Allow border U.S. producers to hire as they choose, and for immigrants when they come to be able to work as they choose. And I, again, like to cite the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And one of their objections the king, has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose, obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither. Right now, every country of the world seeks barrels of oil. They'll do anything, go to war to get barrels of oil. And then they do the same opposite thing to keep people out. Well, frankly, I view people much better than barrels of oil, and they ought to be treated that way. So, last slide. Thank you very much.
Hola. Thank you so much, Ken. The presentation, today we have a different dynamic of the panels. All of our three speakers are going to give a presentation like Ken did, and then we're going to move on to a conversation and then some questions from the audience. I want to invite next in the stage to Wes Benedict. I'll introduce him. He's a libertarian leader and a former executive director of the Libertarian National Committee. With a background in business, he focuses in advancing libertarian policies, reducing government interference, and of course, promoting personal freedom. Wes, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here today at the Liberty International World Conference. My name is Wes Benedict. I served as the executive director of the National Libertarian Party for 8 years. That's longer than anyone else ever served in that position. I think the party has been going downhill lately, and I don't know why. I don't know why it's been going down. Maybe somebody can figure it out. After I left, it's kind of been going down in some ways. Chase Oliver did a great job, by the way. It's not because of him. There are many great libertarians, but when I think back when COVID happened, the coronavirus outbreak was starting to happen and the government was starting to crack down on people, the Libertarian Party was very weak in responding to that. I was so disgusted that I had to write my own content and press releases about the COVID and what's the libertarian response should be. You can find, I wrote something in here, you can pick this up later. It's called A Libertarian Prescription for Coronavirus. And to me, it foresaw a lot of the things that were about to happen. I wrote this in early 2020. It's not like medical advice or conspiracy stuff on medicine. I'm not a medical expert. These were prescriptions for what the government should do. Okay, libertarians, we are experts on what the government should do and should not do. So I encourage you to pick that up. I think it was one of the best things written by anyone about COVID-19 when it was first coming out. It was definitely the best thing from the Libertarian Party or someone outside the party that's associated with it. If you find something better, please show it to me. I'd like to see it myself. In recent times, the Libertarian Party's been quite weak on free trade, on immigration, and of course, there was one other thing I wanted to name: tariffs, trade, and immigration. So in any case, before that, I would say I was a normal person. I was an engineer, had an MBA. Now I run something called the Libertarian Booster Pack. It's what I do full-time, almost full-time. It pays most of my bills. My claim to fame is I have recruited more libertarian candidates than anyone else in the history of the party. And I've recruited more who won their elections, and I've recruited a whole lot more who lost their elections. Okay, I love them all. I wasn't always a libertarian. I used to be a Republican, and I wasn't like a Ron Paul Liberty Republican. I was like a right-wing, conservative, typical Republican, more like a Newt Gingrich Republican or a Rush Limbaugh Republican. I was totally Republican. I was for free markets, capitalism, free trade, low taxes, that kind of stuff, and I had read quite a bit about it, and I knew about it. But because I was a Republican, I was also pro-war. You know, I loved America. Anytime there was an announcement of another military action, I'm like, yeah, we're going to go kick some more ass. America is a great place. We love America. We're rich. We're intelligent. We're successful. These other places, the best thing they could use is a good kick in the ass from American military, right? Get them in shape. That was my mindset. Of course, I was against the war. I'm a Republican. I was against the war on drugs. Of course, half my friends smoked marijuana in college. But still, and even they were against, that was for the war on drugs. And even though half my friends probably smoked marijuana, and even they were for the war on drugs just because everybody thought it was the right thing back then. And of course, I was anti-immigrant, definitely against immigration. Of course, they would show on television, an illegal immigrant came from Mexico, crashed his car, killed some people, and that's a horrible thing, right? It is horrible. Or an immigrant came in and murdered someone, and now, that was an illegal immigrant who did it. Of course, I was against legal immigration as well. I mean, not totally against it, but somewhat against it. I would say you could maybe tell that I kind of look down on foreigners. Any foreigners here, by the way? Raise your hand if you're a foreigner. Okay, there's a few foreigners here at the Liberty International World Conference. All right, so I'll be careful. I looked at, we had foreign students, and I went to the University of Texas. We had foreign students there. Why are they here learning our engineering and then going back to their home countries and competing with us? Are we paying for this? Are we subsidizing their education? I don't know. It just didn't seem right to me. So in any case, one year, some friends said at spring break, they were going to take a bus halfway across down Mexico and go over to the Pacific coast to a small town and hang out and have the beer's real cheap there. And they're going to eat fish tacos under a cabana right there on the beach. And I was like, that sounds great. I'm going to go. And it was a great time. It was. I had a great time. Later on, I became an engineer at a major international company. They asked me to go to Italy for 6 months to work as an engineer. And I said, you know what, that foreign stuff, it's kind of fun. I think I'd like to go to Italy. So I went to Italy. The people in Italy were very nice to me. They'd invite me over to their home for Sunday dinner. They'd start at like noon, and they wouldn't get up until 8 at night. They'd have course after course, a drink, a meal. It'd just go on and on. It was so fun. And they showed me how to find a gym, how to do this, everything all over Italy. Just extremely nice people. Next, they asked me to go to South Africa for 6 months. And you know what I said, right? This foreign stuff is kind of fun. I think I want to go to South Africa. So I went to South Africa for 6 months. I don't know if this I'm going to try the projector. If this doesn't work, I don't really need any of the slides, but let's just see what happens. Okay, yeah. So I go to South Africa. This is right after Nelson Mandela was let out of jail and was elected president. All the people in South Africa were nice to me. A lot of them didn't like each other. They had the white apartheid. Whites lived separately from blacks and ruled over them for so long. There was a lot of racial, hatred between the races there. Everybody was pretty nice to Americans. So this is just a picture I took with some of the at a home I visited. One of the black South Africans took me way out in the country to some of the townships. I don't remember which exactly this one is, but those are shanties. I don't know if you remember hearing about the shanties all the time when we were all talking about South Africa a few decades ago. And I remember going into one, meeting these people. They let me inside. Of course, this guy on the right is drinking a beer. Their cheap beer, they called it beer, came in a milk carton. That's how cheap the beer is that he was. And, of course, he shared it with me. And, of course, I felt obligated to take a sip, of a drink of this beer that he had. He lives in that shanty. He's sharing his beer with me. So, you know what? One more slide I needed to show. After all that foreign travel, I got together with a friend of mine who had a similar background, and we had worked together, and he had worked in different places overseas, and we said, this foreign stuff is so much fun, why don't we quit our jobs and do it full time, so we don't have to go to work all day. And the two of us both quit our jobs, and we were both from Texas. We started out driving out to California, and then our goal was we're going to drive all the way to the tip of South America. Okay, it's a long way. It's longer than all the way across Texas, right? It's a long way. So that was our goal. It wasn't a hard goal, but it was something to shoot for. We started out over in California, went down the Pacific coast, halfway down Mexico, cut across to Mexico City, up to the Yucatan, down into Belize and Guatemala, driving the whole way. Now we had a good time the entire time, and it took us 3 months just to get down to Guatemala. Met a lot of great people. Our vehicle, it was a 4-wheel drive, but we would often get stuck in the beach. People would see us trying to peel out, get out. They just come running, pushing us out. We went to people's homes. We met so many great, nice people. And it changes how you feel about people. When you hate immigrants, you see all the bad things that happen. You see the bad things they do. When you like them, you care about them. You care about what happens to them. You're like, man, my government sucks in America. Your government really sucks. Your Mexican government sucks. Your South African government sucks. Your Guatemalan government really sucks. And it's a shame. And I feel bad for you. And I want you to have a better life. And so I've changed my mind on some things. There are people in awful places like Haiti. They just want to get out. They just want to escape. They don't need welfare. They'll leave and come anywhere without welfare. They don't all have to come to America. Some would go to Mexico, to Brazil, anywhere, right? I mean, if you look at the bottom 10% of the people in the world, all of them would be happy to go somewhere that's a little bit better than that. I imagine Palestinians, they hate the Israeli government. A lot of them also hate Hamas, the people controlling them. It's like they're stuck there. They're like slaves. They're like hostages. They would love to get out and go anywhere. They don't need welfare. They don't need anything. They just want to escape. When people are in a sinking ship or if they're in a house that's burning, we want to allow them to escape. The same thing should apply to people who are stuck in some of these countries where they have an awful life. There's no hope of an individual in North Korea overthrowing his government. How many Cubans have been executed for trying to overthrow their own government? Again, I'm not asking for welfare for anyone. Just let them escape. So back to policies. When I became executive director of the Libertarian Party, you have to pretend to be an expert on everything. You put out press releases on trade, on immigration, on everything, taxes, whatever. When I was executive director, you do some quick research, and I'll tell you the thing that impacted me the most, and I already knew a lot about stuff, and I'm for immigration, even if it's not the best thing for American citizens. I'm for it because of liberty, right? Like, you don't have to convince me guns prevent crime. It's your freedom to own a gun, whether they prevent crime or cause more crime. I'm for it for liberty. But the one thing that impacted me more than anything, doing research after I have an open mind, is stuff like this from the Cato Institute. The 14 most common arguments against immigration and why they're wrong. I mean, there's things in here. Immigrants commit fewer crimes, even illegal immigrants. They commit fewer crimes than Native Americans. That's not what the conservative media ever told me. Immigrants use welfare less than Native Americans. That's not what the conservative media ever told me. Immigrants learn English. They adopt the cultures here. They don't keep their own cultures. That's not what the conservative media told me. Are you telling me the conservative media has been lying to me. Yes. Now, a lot of libertarians like to do extensive research and create very long documents with lots of facts. Cato has a lot of them. This is a pretty short one, though. I love this one. Again, this is the single most impactful publication that changed my mind on issues. I already knew about low taxes and all that. That's written everywhere. But this is the 14 most common arguments against immigration and why they're wrong. And I read this and it just blows my mind. Now, these days, Donald Trump is out there saying immigrants are bad. They're murderers. They're rapists. They kill people. They're sending the worst people over here. Meanwhile, and he's turned a lot of people against immigration. Meanwhile, some from the left are saying, hey, you know, they are victims of foreign capitalism or whatever. We need to be nice to immigrants. Let them come here, give them welfare, maybe send foreign aid to wherever they come from or where they live. So you've got these leftist socialists being nice to immigrants. Meanwhile, people like Donald Trump associated with the Republican Party here and associated with free markets and capitalism, you've got them sounding like they hate immigrants, sounding like they are horrible racists. And so now you got to wonder, what's an immigrant going to want to do? Are they going to want to be associated with free markets and racism and hatred? Or are they going to be associated with people who are trying to be nice to them? It's going to be hard for them to adopt the free market stance. Well, look, libertarians, we've run a lot of candidates for various races. We've lost a lot of races over time. The one biggest reason I want to run libertarian candidates for office is to get messages out there. Libertarians have been saying the war on drugs is wrong. We need to legalize marijuana. Libertarians have been saying it's okay to have gay marriage. If you don't like government, let gays get married. When I joined the Libertarian Party, we talked about those issues. I actually never thought they would succeed. You know, I'm just going to say all this stuff. It's never going to work. In fact, it has worked, and a big reason is because Republicans sometimes listen to libertarians where they won't listen to a Democrat or a liberal. I was definitely that way. When I was a Republican, if a Democrat said something, I hated I just disagreed because they're the bad guys, they're crazy liberal hippies, they got no good ideas, I don't agree with them. That's the way Republicans still are today. They think Kamala Harris and Democrats are the most evil thing ever created. They won't listen to them. They will listen to libertarians. And so we need libertarians on the ballot, just as activists, whatever you may be, out there explaining the truth on immigration. We don't need long documents. We just need immigrants to say, no, immigrants use less welfare. Yes, immigrants do pay most of the taxes. No, immigrants don't commit more crime. And so I encourage you, if you have an open heart and an open mind, take a closer look at immigration and think about the benefits of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wes. Now, I would like to invite to stage to Wojciech Jakubas. He is a Polish libertarian dedicated to advancing individual rights and free market. Through his activism, he fostered global projects and education initiatives promoting liberty and personal responsibility. Wojciech has been personally aiding people in the frontier with Ukraine and Poland during the war. So, welcome to the stage, Wojciech.
Thank you. Thank you for kind invitation. I'm happy to say that this is actually my first speech at the Liberty International Conference. And not only that, that is also my first visit to the great country of America. And thank you. I'm very thankful to two organizations, namely Liberty International and the Foundation of Freedom and Entrepreneurship, for giving me this opportunity to talk in front of you. And quite frankly, Jacek Spendel, that was the guy that invited me here, got me in a really tough situation. And why is that? Because speaking after two titans like Ken and Wes, and trying to act as sort of advocatus diaboli for the opposite side than the one they're presenting, is a hell of a task for a first-timer like me. But I'll do my best nonetheless. I have quite personal experience when it comes to immigration, being an immigrant myself. For a few years, I've been working and studying in 2 different foreign countries. Those countries being Sweden and Germany. But I would say there is one experience that provided, that touched me and moved me and changed me, if I dare to say it, even more profoundly than my own life experience as an immigrant. 1,000 days ago, and that is exactly the number of the days since the Russian invasion of Ukraine started, I have left my life in Sweden and went to the Ukraine to do whatever I can do to help those people. And that led me to setting up and operating an NGO, organizing different types of aid for the people of Ukraine. And in course of that help, I personally evacuated people from the danger and threat of the war zones to the safety of Europe. Having said that, I would try to present certain arguments why some form of border control, migration control, might be, to say the very least, non-contradictory with libertarian principles. So that's the quick plan of the talk. At first, let's start with a certain reality check. I'll give a few premises from which I will continue to follow the arguments from. As much as libertarians usually we like to speak about the abstract. We like to reason from the principle. We are often accused of living on another planet, like not living in the reality. So that is why I chose to focus my presentation more on the reality side. But nonetheless, as a libertarian, being a libertarian myself, I will present a philosophical argument on border control. Then I'll go quickly through the utilitarian arguments and present a case of Poland. Because I would say that the way in which my talk will be different from the talk of my predecessors is actually that not only I am a libertarian, like probably everyone else in this room, I'm a European coming from a country of Poland, and well, I guess I'll be able to shed some light on what's going on in Europe when it comes to immigration. I hope you will be able to understand a little bit more of what you are reading on the news when it comes to that issue in Europe. Let's start with the premises. That's a very useful thing. since, as Ayn Rand herself observed, contradictions do not exist. And she goes further, saying whenever you face or think you are facing a contradiction, check your premises. So that is why it's extremely useful to start with the premises listed out, because it makes it easier to point out flaws in the further reasoning. Let's start with the first one. Sovereign states do exist. Let's raise the hand, any anarcho-capitalist that we have here? Well, there is quite a lot. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you guys, but we ain't there yet. We do have things called sovereign nation state. Second thing, not only states do exist, but also nations. They do exist, however artificial they might be. Because frankly, if we move back merely 300 years ago, when you look at a span of history, it's really really short time, merely 10 generations or so. And if we would meet our ancestors living 300 years ago and ask them, hey, great-great-great-grandpa, what nationality are you? We would quite probably be very surprised by the answer. 300 years ago, we didn't have this thing called American nation. We didn't have Mexican nation. We didn't have Brazilian, Colombian nation. Not only that, in Europe, that is perceived as having their nations settled and being rooted in their history for hundreds of years. 300 years ago, there were only very few people that would call themselves French. And for that matter, even fewer people that would actually speak what could be recognized as a French language nowadays. Just ask any German if they think if Bavarians speak German. That's probably that's a relic of this situation. So nations needed to be, in a way, artificially created by the schooling system, by the media, by inventing and creating national cultures. So that is that. On the other hand, I think it would be very hard to argue that nations do not exist for that reason. We do have American nation right now, and as well as we have any other nation. Those nations being a group of people, frankly, they need a way of organizing themselves politically. And whether we like it or not, the current situation is that those groups of people organize themselves through a vehicle of the nation state. If we are lucky enough, as I hope most of us in this room are, we live in states that chosen democratical process as their way of making decisions, of allowing members, actual members of those groups, to have a voice and try to work out a solution of whatever problem they're discussing. Again, whether we like it or not, the result of those discussions is the welfare state, government expenditure, taxes, and all those things we as libertarians like to complain about, and rightly so. All those things are not going anywhere. I think that up until this point, I didn't tell anything specifically from European and Polish perspective. But then there are certain groups of people, I put nations here, but probably using the word states, it appears to me right now would be a more precise way to put it. So there are states and other groups that are actively hostile towards us and our ideas. So the way I picture it, correct me, all the people from America, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not like you're waking up in the middle of the night worrying that those evil Canadians are plotting against you. And the same thing probably goes for Mexicans. Whereas in Poland, we have a neighbor that launched an active, full-scale military aggression against their neighbor. And we also have a border with a country that is their satellite, namely Belarus. And that changes our perspective on migration in a tremendous way. I'll show later on why exactly is that. And then, as Wes mentioned in his presentation, libertarians are famous for being an experts on everything and pretending to have a solution for everything. Well, the thing is that there are no ideal solutions to anything, and there is always some kind of trade-off. No matter how clever, what solutions shall we come up, there are always trade-offs. And what Alex Kolodin mentioned to me yesterday when I asked him a question, hey, how do you assess a policy when it comes to unintended consequences? He would reply that I try to weigh costs and benefits, and if the perceived benefits outweighed costs, I would go for it. A theoretical argument on border control can be basically summed as stemming from freedom of association. If we come from a Nozick perspective of self-ownership, a person owns himself, herself, that is accepted by all libertarians, that is, we treat it as given. Then what it stems from self-ownership is self-determination. We have a right to live our lives as we see it, as we see fit. That is up to us to decide. And one of the freedoms or rights that come out of this argument is a right to associate with people with whom we want to associate. We are free to choose our partners, our friends. We are free to choose the people that we do business with, and we would consider it a horrifying intrusion on our personal lives if someone else would decide that for us. Well, then there is the other coin of this argument, namely the right to associate entails the right to exclude. We are free not only to choose people we do associate with, we are free to choose the people with whom we don't associate with. And then someone would say, okay, but that is on the personal level. How does it scale up? Then the argument goes, it does scale up for groups. Let's have a group like golf club, and it would be obvious for every one of us that certain groups like golf clubs can have very exclusive and very, in fact, arbitrary rules of accepting or declining their members. State being, in a way, being an organized group of people would also have the same way. Then I'll go through some utilitarian arguments on border control. authoritarian parties promising to curb down the immigration. That is actually a huge issue right now in Europe, with all those parties like Alternative for Germany, like Swedish Democrats, like Freedom Party of Austria. Just notice how many of those authoritarian parties like to put freedom in their names. The reason why they are getting so shockingly high support is the immigration. They are the only party, those are the only types of parties that voice concern of millions of people who feel that something is not right in their countries. And we cannot ignore people like them, because once we ignore it for a sufficiently long time, as we did in Europe, the party like Alternative for Germany would come up, and within a few years, they would end up being the second force in the parliament. Because the issue of immigration is the most important issue for lots and lots of Europeans. It's more important than the economic situation. It's more important than any issue on foreign policy. And they cash out on that in a very effective manner. Well, then I've been shown by Sugandhi that my time is running out. I'll just go briefly through all those arguments we heard, probably quite a lot of time. Cost of social benefits and welfare states and bureaucracy. That's what happens in Europe when within rising immigration, we need to provide things like housing, things like excuse me, I'll leave it right now for a moment. The surge of social tensions, that is something that the Russians are expecting to happen when they send migrants through Belarusian border into the EU. Internal security issues, that is something we absolutely need to have at least some form of control. Right now, we don't have any way of knowing who is getting into our countries if those people come across the borders illegally. And we have absolutely no idea why those people, who those people are, and why they're there. If there are potential criminals, terrorists, agents set out to cause turmoil. What we need is at least some way to know who those people are. Then there are certain groups of people that hold views incompatible with what we call modern liberal democracy. And the thing is, once we let enough of those people in, after a few years, they're getting a right to vote. And if we do not convince if we do not convince them that we, as a home culture, that we have actually a better idea of organizing things, and that they should accept our ways of liberal democracy, then within time we will get less and less freedom, not more of it. The case study of Poland is that there is this crisis happening on the border with Belarus. with Belarus supported by Russia. What they would do, they would invite people from, well, God only knows where. They would invite them to Belarus, promising an easy way into Europe, and send them across the green border. That's what Poland was recently quite famous for. That's why Poland is being perceived by some people as a deeply anti-immigration nation. I'd like to challenge that view, at least a little bit. We accepted up until 2 million people fleeing the war in Ukraine. And by the way, that is a beautiful example of what we as libertarians preach, and that is help on personal level. Much of the help that we provided to the Ukrainians wasn't provided by the Polish state. It was actually provided by the Polish people. So you have those people saying, okay, if you like immigrants so much, then why don't you invite a few of them to your own house? And there are thousands of people in Poland that did exactly that. But someone might say, okay, Ukrainians, those are people culturally similar to you, linguistically similar to you. That was an easy part for you guys. Well, actually, there's a huge surge of immigration from all over the world, from countries like India, Uzbekistan, Turkey, Philippines, Zimbabwe, some Southern American countries, coming to Poland legally. That is a matter of the last 10 years, and we do not see any rising social tensions following those, this process. That shows Poland being relatively easy nation to immigrate in, and quite frankly, just as Polish immigration was a huge success story, I would also argue that immigration is being a success story for us as well. I wanted to end saying that immigration is a beautiful, wonderful example of what we preach. It's a win-win situation. Let's not ruin it by the people hostile to liberty. Thank you.
I want to invite back to the stage Ken and Wes. We're going to start our conversation for a couple minutes. Well, thank you so much. That was really amazing, and it's definitely immigration is the hot button, especially nowadays, and with the recent declarations of characters like Trump, the situation in Ukraine and Russia, the situations that we have in Colombia with Venezuela as well. So it's definitely that hot button. I'm just gonna do a couple of questions in general to all of you, and I want to start with asking you, how can we address the fears? Because I feel most of the issues that come about migration and the general people, when they hear migration, they feel fear of my job is going to be taken, I'm going to leave wars, I'm going to be killed. So how can we, as libertarians, address these fears about immigration and criminality while promoting the benefits of free movement? How can we do as this generation? Maybe each of you can touch on this topic just for a couple minutes. We can start with you, Ken.
We've seen some examples of mass opening of countries. For example, in Eastern Europe, there were 10 countries that joined the European Union, now 27 countries in all. They opened up, and there were fears that people were going to lose their jobs. But actually, the jobs don't belong to them. They belong to their employer. And it is the right of the employer to choose whoever is the best worker for that money. It doesn't belong to the worker. It belongs to the one who's paying the money for it. And they found that when they opened up to Eastern European countries, there was everyone didn't leave Eastern Europe because people actually like living where they grew up. It's usually some very diligent and hardworking people who leave and look to other places that are risky and hostile, potentially hostile. And they did a lot of productive work in the countries that they went to. And a lot of investment poured into those other Eastern European countries because they were open and freer to move. We find the United States is 50 different states. People move around all the time between the states. We don't have borders and barriers between them. And yeah, there was all the time there were people maybe in Florida who fear all these Californians coming to Florida, you know, and all those New Yorkers coming to Texas. Yeah, there's a reason for fear, but that's not the reason that's not a justification for taking away somebody else's life. Yes, the Hans Hoppe argument is that, yes, we can exclude people if we want, and I agree. You can exclude people from your own property and your territory if you wish, but you cannot impose that exclusion on another person who wants to invite. There are inviters who want to invite people, and they should have that right.
Thank you, Kim.
What if we just use one mic and leave it on?
Okay.
It's still on? Yeah, okay. Well, to counteract the fear, first of all, with the truth, it's nice that the truth, they don't use welfare more than residents. They aren't more criminal. That's a big way to counteract fear, is to speak up the truth. A lot of folks use immigrants as an excuse. You know, it's the current scapegoat. Germany had their scapegoats for a while. Presently, Donald Trump likes to use immigration and immigrants as scapegoats in America. But it's not immigrants who came up with the $2 trillion COVID spending. It was white Republicans who came up with that and passed it and implemented it. Lots of problems here in America, you know, they're done by Republicans and Democrats. It's not immigrants. A lot of immigrants don't get to vote. So I think we have a job to educate people. But the biggest thing is counteract the lies often. It works. Just like with marijuana. Legalize it will save money on tax spending for jails and things. Well, it's an issue about freedom. If you're Republican, you should stand up for freedom. Well, you know, immigration. If you're for lower taxes, building a wall is an expensive thing. It's not a good way to solve problems. Immigrants are not here for welfare and to make our country worse. Most of them came from countries where they hate their government. They hate the big government that won't let them start businesses, that won't let them find a job. They want to come to America where we have freedom and free enterprise and job opportunities. So counteracting them often.
Thank you, Wes. I want to do a follow-up question with you specifically, Wes. You said you used to be a Republican, and I want to know, in your perspective, since you did that change, that shift in your mind because you traveled, you went away, how can we as libertarians and as young libertarians and as international libertarians hold responsible Republicans like the one that you used to be about the role of interventionist politics of the USA in other countries, for example, with the sugar subsidies or the drug on wars? How can we keep these Republicans accountable on their complaining about immigration, but at the same time, they're promoting policies that are damaging countries and people have to leave because of this? Yeah, that's for you.
Well, I caught most of that question, but it's, for me, I was a closed-minded Republican, not open to Democrats or the left. So there was nothing they could say. They could have given me a list of facts in a 100-page report, and I wouldn't have listened to it. So when it comes to changing minds on immigration, I think it has to be libertarians who already have something in common with people whose minds you're trying to change. Like you, I want lower taxes. Like you, I'm for small government. Like you, I think I should have private property and control of my own space. And so we're not trying to take that away from you. We're not trying to take your wealth and give it to an immigrant. We're trying to just let the immigrant have the freedom to take care of themselves. So I didn't capture the part about our policies on foreign countries that might have been different outside of that.
Yeah, how can we keep accountable those Republicans on those mixed ideas that they have?
How can we what?
Keep them accountable.
We just got to call them out when they're spouting lies, and a lot of libertarians are scared to do that. When I would send a press release on pro-immigration things, I'd get so much hate email back. I'd sometimes get phone mail and stuff in the mail saying this is horrible, And so a lot of libertarians are cowards when it comes to immigration. You don't hear many people saying what I'm saying. There's definitely some in this room that would say this stuff, but more of us got to have some courage and speak up. I mean, we still have some free speech in America. There's significant free speech in other countries as well, and the people who know this, who care about other people besides themselves, got to speak up. Just one quick fact, there was some economist, I think it was Brian Kaplan or something from one of those universities near DC, he was saying he's estimated the GDP of the world could double in about 4 or 5 years with open immigration, because people could move from where they have a horrible existence, and you just simply put them in a better place, and now they're more productive because they don't have the chains of government on them. We got to explain that. Capitalism brought a lot of people out of poverty. Immigration lets them go to where the capitalism is and bring themselves out of poverty as well.
Thank you, Wes. Let's go back to Wojciech. I'm going to rephrase the question a little bit because you had a different take. So in Europe, immigration has sparked a significant political and social debates. How can libertarians worldwide, not only in Europe or in America, how can we navigate these continuous discussions and advocate for a free movement that resonates with both policymakers and the public?
Well, my first reaction, being a data nerd as I am, would be to present data that's like the ones that can show the data and graphs concerning spending, taxes, concerning crime rates. But then I remembered that people don't really care about graphs and data. They care about stories. Mm-hmm. And that is something that the other side is very proficient in using. It takes one single story of an immigrant, drunk driving immigrant that killed someone on the road, to change the whole mood in the whole country. And the way I see it is that the things happen for themselves in a way. And what I mean by that is it happens naturally. The more and more people would come to a country, like Polish people coming to the UK, that was, to put it mildly, skeptic about mass immigration from what they call Eastern Europe. And with more and more people coming in, people would realize that it's not some abstract, evil Eastern European immigrant that is after my job. That is actually a guy like me, a guy that I'm working with, that could be my friend, that has the same worries, hopes and dreams for himself as I do. And that is how the integration happens. It really does happen by itself. Coming from Poland, I definitely witness that gradual change of sentiment towards Polish immigration in Western Europe. Back in the times of my parents, Polish were having this rather nasty stereotype of drunkards, thieves, stealing cars, etc. All those Polish jokes running in, for example, Germany. There is absolutely none of that left anymore. And that happened because people, quite frankly, they got to learn us. As simple as that.
Thank you, Wojciech. I always say that the most interesting questions always come from the audience. So we're going to open the space for a couple of questions from you guys. Sarah will be passing the microphone if we have any questions. I see one here on the back.
I might just relate one story while she's taking the mic over.
I'll pass my mic.
The SS St. Louis that was taking 900 Jews from Amsterdam to Havana wasn't allowed to disembark in Havana, wasn't allowed to disembark in the United States because at the Council of Evian, 32 countries said no more Jews or Eastern Europeans, Poles and all the rest from Central Europe who were trying to flee Hitler, Mussolini and Stalin weren't allowed to. So millions died in the concentration camps who had tried to escape and could have been part of the resistance against those tyrannies, but they weren't allowed.
Hey, Ken and group, thank you. First of all, we've done television programs for 35 years on a lot of subjects. Immigration is the #1 most difficult one, in my opinion. So I thank you all for your opinions. Laughlin, Ohio, you've all heard of Laughlin, Ohio, 3,400 people, population, 3,000 Mauritanians moved in there, stoves burning, apartments burning, people moving out, people on the street, Mauritanians on the street, not getting out of the way, all kinds of problems where you get 3,000 immigrants illegal into one place that had 3,000 other people. That is a problem. I'm sorry. It is a problem. I just immigrated. I spent all my life, except the last 3 years, within 30 miles of right here. I just immigrated to the People's Socialist Republic of France 3 years ago. And I can tell you that it's difficult. The thing I had to go through, I'll show you my papers here that I had to go through to get that. And yet, I would say that people in France know about the people who are citizens, and they want to know that people like me have the ability to live there without being a ward of the state. But I do have a carte vitale, which gives me, quote, free health care. I would say that we don't want people coming into this country not knowing about them any more than they know about us. I think they know too much about us. So that's a whole other issue I think we'd agree on. But it's a real problem to say that you ought to open everything all at once at one time. And I understand the government can never do it right. They haven't done it right for all the reasons you've said. And so I understand that's the issue. But it's really something that takes more of a thought process, I think, than just saying, let's go open immigration because at one point in time you're going to create more problems than you solve, at least in the short run, in my humble opinion.
Well, I'll start with a comment and then I'll pass it to the others here. Yes, I agree with you. There are problems when people mix from around the world. I'd say that the government has a lot to do with creating those problems. They don't allow people to work, and they give out welfare. The welfare wasn't created by these immigrants. The welfare was created by the Democrats and Republicans who overwhelmingly voted for a welfare state and a warfare state. They're ones that are creating this welfare in the first place. I don't think immigrants should get welfare, but I don't think Americans should get welfare either. And so I'd end all of that. And the same complaints were about the Irish coming from the Catholics because they're coming from Ireland, the Italians who were coming into the country. There's always been complaints about newcomers for a variety of reasons, but usually people had a motive to fit in really quickly because there was nothing to take care of them, and they helped each other to assimilate very, very quickly. And I would say if the government got out of the way, these people would have a stronger motive to do that here. Okay, let me.
So Texas, we learned from Jeff Neal, is a big place, right? In 1960, there were 10 million people in Texas. 50, 60 years later, there's 30 million people in Texas. You can go from 10 million to 30 million people, and it works. Dallas, Texas, there was 30 years ago, there was like 4 million people in this metro area. Now there's 8 million people in this metro area. Now, when it got to 7 million, it was probably crowded and annoying, but another million people said, I still want to go to Dallas, Texas, right? Obviously, crowding creates some problems. Where I live in Williamson County, it's just north of Austin, Texas. I think the population there has doubled in probably 30 years. It's probably doubled, if not more. Some of them immigrants, but most of them highly educated immigrants that work at Dell Computer. These are like people with higher education and better jobs than I have, and we complain about them as well. You know, a lot of folks who live there don't like these new people coming here. It gets more crowded. All the people who lived in Austin, Texas 20 years ago, which included me, we love to talk about how Austin has changed because all these new people came. And again, in Austin, it's gotten whiter. It's not gotten more brown or more black. It's actually turned whiter and whiter, kind of like San Francisco. It's the people showing up creates some nuisance. But look, a lot of good things happen. These big places, a lot of people want to go there. There's a lot of great opportunity. There's a great opportunity for the new people there. There's great opportunity for the people who already live there. And I would just ask you to please put up with a little bit of nuisance of a little bit of too much traffic, maybe not as many open fields and forests to see, to allow people who might die otherwise of starvation or warfare. Let them come and be, you know, I don't want to give charity to anyone. I don't want the government to give welfare, what have you. That's like the one form of charity I absolutely want to offer. Let you escape from somewhere horrible and get to somewhere better.
Yes, my thoughts exactly. I definitely agree with Wes on that. The difference between America, at least in the first part of 20th century, and the present Europe, I would say, is just that, the presence of the welfare state. Back in 1920s, the people that would come to America, and as stereotypically, it sounds America is really a country built by immigrants. They came here for the opportunity. They came here to escape whatever they perceived as threat to their freedoms and prosperity, just because there was no welfare to get. There was no incentive of not creating value, because actually, if you come from a desperate, desolate country into America, without having anything else than the clothes on your back. Providing value is really the only way how you could survive. And it also happens to be so that this is how the integration happens. So I definitely agree on that. I would also like to come back to the story of SS St. Louis that Ken mentioned. That's one example of a situation of bigger force, when the situation is so critical that not letting those people in, the consequences would be death. Consequences would be terminal. And I do agree that in certain extreme conditions, such form of open borders, one might say, is absolutely acceptable, and that is exactly what happened during the first weeks of Ukrainian war. Poland basically opened borders wide open. There were absolutely no checks. Anyone that needed to flee the country could flee the country, basically showing their gym membership card instead of legal document. That's how extreme that was.
Thank you, Wojciech. Sadly, our time here has ended, on stage has ended, but I invite all of you that still have a question, Wes, Ken, and Wojciech will be right here with us. We're going to go on a short 10-minute break, and we'll be back here for our final panel and a speaker for this afternoon. So remember, coffee's here. Go enjoy the tables and go take a look at the book of Ron Manners, and please keep enjoying the conference. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.